remember, wow, even as a little girl, I was just terrified by this world. And I spent so much of my life trying to not know what something deep down inside me was knowing or getting ready to know, and getting ready to just fully see. I sensed the Demiurge when I was like 4.5 years old. I didn't know what it was. It just seemed to me like God had a really sadistic sense of humor to make us so that we would have to die, so that we would have to get old and sick or injured or whatever. I realized my own mortality very, very suddenly. It was just in a sudden moment. I was in the car with my granddad one afternoon, riding, and he was just driving the car, not really, his mind was on whatever his mind was on, and we were talking about some old ladies who went to our church, and we went to a Baptist church. It wasn't a hellfire brimstone kind of preacher. We had real soft-spoken preachers. That's the kind of church I went to growing up in North Carolina. And there were some old ladies who went to our church. They were so old. They were so old. When they would walk in the door, it would just scare me because they were so old, you know. They just scared me. And one of them had died, and I apparently had an understanding about death. But I just thought that was what happened to old people, and I just kind of assumed old people became that way kind of because they chose to, or something. It was their decision, or they weren't paying attention or something. But this old lady had died, and I said to my granddad, I hope I never get old or die. And he was just driving the car, and he wasn't paying much attention. He said, well, everybody has to get old and die. And it just hit me. It just, boom. Whoa. I have to get old? I have to die? And I just suddenly knew. I just, boom. And it was, oh God, that was the most significant moment of my life. It sounds silly, but I don't know how most children realize their mortality. I think it's kind of a gradual thing, but with me it was just boom, all of a sudden, and it felt like, I felt it physically. It must have been adrenaline or something. It felt like this big invisible fist just boom hit me in the heart, and and up until that point I didn't think I had to die. I didn't, I was just a kid, and I believed in God and I loved Jesus, and I used to love dancing to the radio, and and then boom, whoa, all of a sudden. And I was never the same after that, ever. That was the most significant moment of my life. And they say that any thinking person, their awareness of their own mortality is really the most major thing in the for them. And it certainly was for me. But I remember I couldn't put it into words at the time. I remember thinking God had a sadistic sense of humor, and I think it's like I had a sense then afternoon, summertime, late afternoon. The sun was about 45 degrees from the western horizon, and I was gazing over in that direction. That was the image in what I was looking at when all that happened, and that's appropriate. The sun was in the 8th house of death and awareness of mortality. And I just got a sense of this presence, I was sensing the Demiurge. I didn't know what it was. I knew this like sadistic God couldn't really be the real one, but I couldn't understand. I was just like 4.5 years old, but I sensed it. It seemed kind of like it really seemed kind of like a lion. I don't know. In my mind, it was kind of an image of a lion's face. But I forgot what I was going to say. And years later, after that, I walked around in shock. I was walking around in shock. I remember my hands were cold and clammy. I was walking around in shock. I was so scared. I couldn't talk about it, because when I get really, really scared, even now, when I get really scared, I can't talk about what's scaring me. I just I'm too scared of it to even talk about it. And I was like that then. I wish I had talked about it, because I know that if I had talked about it to my mom, she would have said something, to make me feel better. She would have comforted me somehow. I told her I was terrified of dying. I was like, that's just typical me, 4.5 years old, and I'm worried about dying. And that's just me. But as I got older, it's always I remember, I smoked marijuana when I was in my teens, but by the time I was 18, I had to stop because I was having these really, really bad spells, and I would almost black out, and I would, after I would get high, I'd stagger to the bathroom and collapse on the floor and just be about to black out, and just sweat, perspiration, and trying not to black out, because I could sense that. I just hate to faint. I just hate it. I hate that feeling. I was trying to hang on to my consciousness as much as possible. I think I sensed that if I lost consciousness, it would be more like a seizure or something. It was just something coming up, some kind of terror coming up in me, and I know now, with what I know now, I know that what was coming up was this sudden, not just awareness, but experience, total experience, subjective experience, seeing that we are, just knowing that I was a creature in a factory farm situation. I can deal with that now. I don't like it. If I start, I can get stressed out to the point where, I could, get faint and stuff like that again. I don't like that at all, but most of the time when I'm not in that state, just what I know now, I can kind of deal with it. because I have like a framework for understanding it, and it's what I know from Gnosticism. But imagine not having that kind of framework and being a teenager and just suddenly seeing it, suddenly knowing that you are a creature that's in a factory farm situation. And that is, I think, our situation here. It's like I said, we have a predator. And we have more than one. There are numerous predators. But there's one in particular that has us in this factory farm situation. So, and gosh, it was just a few years ago. I was reading one of the Carlos Castaneda books, Castaneda, and Don Juan was talking about this. And darn it, I wish I had that book in front of me right now. Maybe I have. I know I copied some of it. Anyway, there's a point where Don Juan talks about this very, very thing. The predator. He talks about it. And he says, it's among shamans, it's the topic of topics. And, he's right. But it's just the way it is.